Good evening, everyone, and welcome to In the Stacks, DC Public School Libraries and Librarians' Role in Preserving Education History. My name is Kimberly Springle, and I am the Executive Director at the Charles Sumner School Museum and Archives. We are presenting this program in celebration of National Libraries, School Libraries Month, and we will honor the various roles that our DC Public School Libraries play in enriching schools and nurturing students with a focus on preserving school histories. If you are new to Sumner Museum programs and events, we welcome you. And if you are a repeat and frequent associate of the museum, we are happy to greet you again. Please be mindful that this program is being live streamed and recorded. Also, please use the chat feature wherever you are to comment and leave questions for the panelists and guests. I would like to remind you to stay connected with us via our social media platforms at Sumner Museum on Twitter and Instagram, and search for Charles Sumner School Museum and Archives on Facebook. If you wish to join our mailing list, please send us a message at info.sumnermuseum@dc.gov. Thank you all for joining us, and enjoy the program as we continue through. I am truly honored to introduce you to our fabulous panelists and moderate a discussion around their role as DC Public School librarians and their connection to their school libraries and the significance of preserving DC Public School histories. Charles Sumner School Museum and Archives' core function is dedicated to preserving the history and legacy of DC Public School history, illuminated in ways to bridge past and present and enrich the lives of current students. Learning and understanding the evolution and movements within DC public education is also a meaningful cultural lens to gain a greater understanding of not just Washington, DC, but the nation as a whole. Our educational system has often been closely observed as we geographically sit in the nation's capital. In addition to that, there is immense pride instilled within Washingtonians who attended our public schools. There are names, places, objects, memories that strongly resonate and mean something to individuals who grew up here in Washington, DC, and also represent the textures of this great city. I have had the pleasure of serving as the museum director for now almost 13 years. And one of my greatest joys of the work is meeting some of the most wonderful individuals that make up the fabric of the city. I am super excited to introduce you to 4 of them this evening. I will introduce them in the order in which I met them, and also share a little bit about them. The first person that I'd like to introduce you all is Blanche Smith. Blanche Smith, I met, I believe, in 2010 or so, around efforts of preserving history pertaining to her school, Dunbar Senior High School. Paul Lawrence Dunbar, Senior High School. She is an illustrious graduate of that school, 1969, active member of the Dunbar Alumni Federation, and formerly served as archivist as well, with materials associated with the now museum that's housed there that we'll learn more about, and just has been a jewel in helping to preserve that school's history. And I also mention her first because I believe it was Dunbar, the 1970 school building, where I really realized just how significant library spaces are in the schools and how that it's often the place where a lot of the material is housed. So I mentioned how I got to know Blanche on the ground, working for preserving the history of DC Public Schools. And I've known her for all these years. I know she's a rock star, but I got to learn about her professional background in preparing for this talk, not just her professional background, but also her community and civic work. And just a little bit about her. She's had a career as a senior cybersecurity expert for the federal government. As I mentioned, she graduated from Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School in 1969 and very active with the Dunbar Alumni Federation. She was inducted as a legend and pioneer in 2015 for work as a social justice advocate. She's also past president of Church Women United DC and a past National Action Global Concerns chair, where she worked with United Nations and also included the delivery of 500,000 signatures to the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, to encourage the US signing of the Convention on the Rights of Women. So again, I knew her as a force for Dunbar history, but as you see, she is really a force in the community and in her professional discipline as well. So welcome, Blanche. The next wonderful person I want to introduce you all to is Ellen Dodsworth. Ellen Dodsworth, I met, I guess, around 2012, 2013, when Spingarn High School was closing. And she was very integral in making sure that much of the material out of that school was collected and deposited at Sumner. And again, we will learn more about that. But a little bit about Ellen's background. She's a native of Chicago, Illinois, and she received her MSLS from Catholic University of America. She worked 7 years as a reference librarian at the university level, including at the Catholic University and Georgetown University. For the last 15 years, she has devoted her time as a DC public school librarian, both at Spingarn and now Eastern Senior High School, where she has worked tirelessly in rebuilding both outdated collections to become relevant and current collections for the students, and has created extensive literacy programming with guest authors and speakers for the benefit of students, staff, and faculty. So she's a real jewel to the system. Welcome, Ellen. We will see you in a minute to continue a conversation about your work. The next wonderful librarian I would like for you all to meet is Pamela Gardner. Pam, if I may call her, that's what I call her generally, if that's okay. I met Pamela, I guess about 2015, 2016, thereabout. And my socks were knocked off when I learned that Pam was leading efforts to digitize materials within the Wilson High School Library, where she serves as a librarian and has for many years. So she successfully did that work. I was there at the opening and the announcement. She was able to garner grant funding and just really has done a lot to make sure that the collection is taken care of, that it's documented and accessible. That's what digitizing does, makes these materials accessible to alumni, students, or anyone else who wants to research them. So again, she's a librarian at Wilson High School, and where she serves over 2,000 students and faculty. She is the first school librarian to receive both the DC Public Schools Standing Ovation Rubenstein Award for Outstanding Staff and Wilson High School's Vincent E. Reed Teacher of the Year Award. And as I mentioned, she goes down in the record books as the first to begin the process of digitizing the school's historical materials. So she's a trailblazer in that regard and a pioneer and really a benchmark that we want to use as we continue to preserve this important history. Welcome, Pam. Our fourth panelist is Juan Samperio. And Juan, I had the privilege of meeting, hi Juan, I guess now 2 years ago, thereabout, as he is newly minted librarian at McKinley Technological High School. So I met Juan, he reached out to us because he was so enthusiastic and excited about preserving the history of McKinley Tech and creating a museum of sorts on site and a place and space for the students to engage and also the alumni. So, which was very impressive. So we're still trying to figure out how to make that happen and how we can support that. But a little bit about Juan's background. He was born in Mexico City and grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada, where he attended college and his family still lives. After 10 years as an elementary school teacher, he made the switch with the help of his students to become a librarian. He received his degree from Syracuse University, and during his graduate program, he completed an internship with the Hirshhorn Museum Library. Hirshhorn is personally one of my favorite museums on the mall. Ever since receiving or earning his librarian degree, he feels fortunate to be a part of the McKinley Technological High School for nearly 2 years. So welcome, Juan. This includes my introductions, and if we can have everyone back, I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you all. Hello, everybody. We're all here. And I believe just to eliminate any kind of echoes, let's just all mute ourselves until you are ready to respond. And of course, I want this to still be a dialogue and conversation. And we're going to kick this off by really having you all speak to your experiences and your relationship with your DC Public School library. Just generally whatever you want to share just to kick the conversation off.
So I guess I need to start. True, I am not a librarian. However, it's just amazing how things come about, because Pam, you received an award named after one of my mentors. Vincent Reed was actually my high school principal, and he's partly responsible for me being in public policy. So our library was used more or less as a gathering place, and the students really went there for a lot of different reasons. So I just love the librarians. My favorite librarian lived just shy of her 100th birthday. And in our school, of course, because we were the first school in the country to educate African Americans, everything was special about our librarian and our library and the people that mentored us.
Anyone else?
Well, I guess I can jump in. What's interesting about my experience, I've been with DC Public Schools for like 25 years, but the last 15 I've been at Wilson. And I attended Wilson back in the 70s. I was one of the first students to help desegregate Alice Deal Junior High School in 1968. My daughters have both attended Wilson, and it's such a rich experience to be a part of my own school. I guess that's why I hold so close to all the history. I mean, I always knew librarians did the history of the school, but for me, it's personal.
Ellen, what about you?
Yes, I've been fortunate to have had a career for 15 years within DCPS. I was at two schools, Glengarn and Eastern, and in both locations, it's been about rebuilding the collections. And some of the tools that I used to rebuild the collection was using secondhand bookstores. And also when bookstores were closing, I think it was Barnes and Noble, not Barnes and Noble, Borders. When stores like that were closing, it was advantageous to get resources, not only books, but also like shelving to rebuild the collection. It's taken a lot of grant writing. It's taken notice by DCPS to increase our budget. And to be honest, it's taken a lot of personal money. And it's also meant building relationships, not only with my librarians that are on this call this evening, but collaboration with faculty and students and outside organizations like like the Open Book Foundation and Faulkner Foundation, Books Book events, and also with Carl Sumner.
Well, it is a lot, and as you can see, I'm learning. This is my second year in the library, and I'm very thrilled by it. And I don't know, I thought teaching was multitasking, but being a librarian is not just multitasking, but it's also creating a network for the students, the teachers, and try to not just be part of the community, but be the community, which is very difficult sometimes when you're just new. But yeah, I'm very happy and very thrilled to be part of your group.
Excellent. Those are all wonderful openers to hear. I know you have so many stories, so I would like to dig into that a little bit. I guess the first, there's a lot of different roles that you all play as librarians that a lot of people don't think about, which was kind of the impetus for this program as well in regards to the preservation piece. But before we jump there, I would like for you, if you can pinpoint, and I know Juan, you're like 2 years in, but what has been for the librarians your most rewarding experience as a school librarian? And for you, Blanche, to have you answer a question, I'd like for you to take yourself back to Dunbar and the library and think about perhaps what was something that was impactful. What was that space like for you personally? And if you have a particular memory or story about your librarian or an experience there. So again, all of the work that you all do, building collections, providing a space to nurture students. I myself personally remember growing up and loving being in the school library, not just from learning instruction about how to improve research papers, but having access to books, obviously, but a space to just go and study and work and be outside of the classroom in a different kind of academic space. But for you all, as the role of librarians, and of course, Blanche, for you as someone who was a receiver of the nurturing of a librarian, I'd like to hear about something that comes to mind as a rewarding experience as a librarian and the impact of the library on you as a student.
So we actually had 2 librarians, but the one that nurtured us the most and provided the learning and the mentoring that we needed was Grace Littlejohn. And the event that really pulled us to her were the riots of 1968. During the 1968 riots, the National Guard took over our armory. Once the dust settled and everybody went back to normal, of course, the next thing was to learn how to record and or journal the events of that time. And Miss Littlejohn, having come from North Carolina and being very active in her neighborhood and the things that happened in her time in that small town where she came from, she was able to provide us with a lot of information, not only about our feelings, but how to journal it, where to look for additional information. And she just made us feel like, you know, we weren't alone. So it was Grace Littlejohn. And like I said, she died in 2017, just a couple of months shy of her 100th birthday, but she always kept in touch with us. We recently had our 50th, although you didn't hear me say that, reunion. And she still was very vibrant. She attended our activities and she would always ask, well, have you kept up your journal? did you read this book? Well, let me show you how this happened. So that's the memory I have of Grace Littlejohn.
Blanche, thank you for raising Grace Littlejohn's name. And I'll just interject here and say to my librarians, is that's something to look forward to, is that legacy and having someone speak your name years later in your impact. So thank you for that, Blanche. But would you like to share the most rewarding experience now for you as librarians in our public schools? Pamela, you're muted.
I think one of the most interesting and exciting opportunities I've had was when Wilson went out for renovation and the school was moved to UDC for a year. And I was able to negotiate with their library to put our school library within theirs. And that was so exciting to have an opportunity for our students to spend a year in a university environment library to learn, and as well for me to learn new techniques and opportunities to grow, in that university environment. But also, I love watching students find themselves when they're in the library. There are so many kids who kind of wander through the building. They're insecure about being among others, and sometimes not insecure. I remember a time when there were gang members who used to walk the halls of Wilson, and being able to pull them in and get them involved in reading. One young man, he was a rapper. He was a gang member, but he was also a rapper. And I convinced him that I would do a video production as we were getting ready to close the library to leave, if he would come up with 2 lines in his rap that were from a Shakespeare play. Just pick anything. And the boy came back and he did it. And it was amazing. And we actually shot the video. So it was experiences like that.
That's amazing.
For me, I think the most rewarding experience is working one-on-one with students. I once was told by a former AP that I would be great in the classroom. I could become a teacher. And I said, well, why would I do that? As a librarian, I not only get to teach, I get to grant write, I get to do events. Every day is different. So, like I said, back to working one-on-one with students, you get to tutor them, and to watch a light bulb go off where they get it, where when they've been in a classroom of 30 students, they're struggling, and just to have that one-on-one contact, to have explanation and go over things personally with them, and that they then finally get the concept. So for me, that's incredibly satisfying, and to help with reviewing their scholarship essays or their college application essays, and then to have them come back to let you know how successful they've been. They got into college, they got the scholarship, all that is rewarding. We get to do so many aspects of dealing with students in some capacity. It's thrilling to hear about their successes and to be part of them, getting, and we're supposed to be, knowledgeable about every subject area. So that's another thing, a student knows that when they come into you, that you can help them in math, in history, in English. Might have to read up a little bit on science. I was more of a social scientist. But anyway, so that's what has been great for me.
Well, I thought teaching first grade was the highlight of my career, to be honest, until I encountered a library, and I was completely impressed. I was surprised about this whole building. I love how disorganized the library was. I love how old the school was. And that part of the library itself was just like, well, can't get any better than this. But just like everyone keeps saying, like every day is different. Every day changes. And when you get to talk to the students and they talk to you in a different way, like they don't talk to you like a teacher. They talk to you as someone they wanted to become acquainted with, which I thought was very interesting. Coming from a teaching background with little kids, the conversation is very different. And now talking to high schoolers, it makes me feel like they're all grown up. And it's rewarding. And it's very rewarding. And also, like Ellen mentioned, is when they're asking for help that you didn't thought you knew about a topic. And it's really rewarding to know how to guide them through their answers. And for me now that I'm in the last year, I've been working purposely more with undocumented students. That has been really rewarding because it's another area of my personal life that has been, it's been with me since I went to the United States for pretty obvious reasons. And working with that demographic itself was just like, boom, something I did not expect. It's something that I definitely did not expect. Nevertheless, like looking and making connections with companies and organizations and try to find scholarship for these students. And not only that, had a really nice conversation just last week about this student who did not want to follow through and apply to college and do that whole routine because of the situation. And I was like, no, now I like become like a motivational speaker for these kids who also, they slow down because they don't want to do any better because they don't think they can do better. But it's incredible the things that they can do. And it's so nice and rewarding to know that I can be that for them. I can be that bridge to connect them to the resources that they need. That's definitely, yeah.
Wow, all of your comments truly warmed my heart. It just shows that extra layer that is so needed in schools, that you're able to, because generally, as a teacher, as you both have pointed, I think Ellen and Juan, you both kind of pointed out, if you have this particular, it's a different kind of relationship, but versus being in this library space, it's like it's like the catcher's mitt almost, because you see these kids at different times of the day, like literally in between classes, and you just have that, I guess, room and space to get to know students intimately and catch maybe where they might slip, and help counsel them on schools or deal with things that are happening outside of the walls of the school. As you mentioned, Blanche, the uprisings of 1968 and how the librarian was helpful in that way. So you all have exemplified just how important that extra layer is as your role as librarians work in schools. So now I want to dig down into preserving school history connected to Sumner's core mission. And that's how I've gotten to know each of you very closely in that regard. And I'd like to know how you see your role as a school librarian intersecting with actively preserving history and culture at your school.
I can begin. That's very exciting, actually. That is like, I think most librarians, we have a love for history. They just comes with us, and I always love history and love looking and imagining old stuff, getting really old and thinking about the time where it was like. And surprisingly enough, within the first month I arrived at McKinley, the principal assigned me this task, and she was very serious about it. So imagine walking in thinking about, wow, this is amazing. And then your principal assigns you an assignment that you're going to love doing and working with it. So I was like, is this serious? Because that sounds like am I going to get paid to do something that I really like and I enjoy doing? So that was like a big thing for me, especially because it literally is like a book. You open in each page, you find out something different about the school. And In this case, I didn't know anything about McKinley. Like my elementary school was just a few blocks down from McKinley. I never even knew they was there. So I kind of felt a little ashamed of that. But at the same time, it's like, that is really neat that I get to learn, and my bias was not there to actually be like, oh, I want to focus on this part in this session. I guess for now is when I reach out to you, it's like, I want to learn about the school. I want to learn about the history, and I have discovered so many wonderful things. That is not just for me to learn or present to a project to the students, because the museum project kind of like was put on hold because of the obvious reasons that we're doing this virtually. So it was very unfortunate that everything was put into a hold, and I didn't know how to integrate this project and continue it, which now I know I can talk to Mrs. Smith to keep going with the project, but which I will get in touch with you. But it was like, it took me so many months to really realize that I can actually keep doing the same project, but now it's going to be online. So what I'm working on right now is developing a website that is going to be, which is that got me to Pam, which is also, I've been stealing your brain about ideas on how to develop not a virtual collection, but a virtual exhibition. So I've been scanning a lot of the materials that I have in the library. And in that, I have discovered many wonderful things about the school, the alumni, and having the website, I think it's going to make that bridge, because when nowadays the students are so electronically advanced and they don't see what we saw when we went to the museum. So I really believe that once they get to go into their website and browse and everything, something might stick in easier than if I show them an item and give them a description. So I really think that it's going to work in my favor to have the website, and then when they get to go to school and they get to see some of these items physically. So I bring them their curiosity before they get to see the item. So I think I'm really looking forward to it, and now I'm going to be bugging.
So I'm not a librarian, as I mentioned before, but as I said, Vincent Reed was my assistant principal. And when the students learned that they were going to tear down our 1916 building and build another school, we were incensed. And as I said, he was one of the people that really started me on this whole social justice journey. We protested, we got suspended, we protested, and he really helped us. But like I said, with a school with the history that we have, and then even in 2013, when we got our fourth or fifth, depending on whether or not you count Sumner, our fifth building that educated Dunbar students. One of the things that we were adamant about was to have a museum. And at the time, and I think it's still true now, we're only one of two actual functioning schools. I think the other is an elementary school in Virginia that has a museum. And the Dunbar Alumni Federation's mission and goal is to make certain that that museum remains current, that the students know about it, and that they actually get to love their history. And their history isn't just Dunbar history, it's the United States history. I mean, because we talk about people like James Europe and, all of the judges and so forth that help run the country. So, the passion that we have for history, the passion that we have for books, the passion that we have for maintaining and communicating our history is important. And we do work with the librarian. We actually create programs with the school librarian when they had one. I think she's been gone 2 years, and I just last week had a conversation in an alumni meeting with the principal, and right now they don't expect to have a librarian next year, but they are going to do some things with the media specialist. So it's important that the kids have some place to go to study, to learn what their passion is in the arts, and to actually help preserve our history.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that got me involved in digitizing the resources. And when I first came to Wilson, many of the students, I would work with the Beacon staff, the school newspaper students, different kids doing research papers, and we would pull through the old Beacons because thanks to our alumni association, we have the Beacons that go all the way back to 1935, and they're in bound books by the years or by groups of years. And kids would come in, but over time, you know, they start tearing up, and so we started the digitalization project so that we could preserve those and put them in shape. So now students can actually search a term. They can look up World War II and find out that Wilson students actually bought a Jeep, that actually 3 Jeeps that went over to France to help the war effort, or how they bought the war stamps, and you know, all the different things that went on, and they can relate to that in their reports and their papers. Just yesterday, I had a student from the Beacon, and we actually pulled out a beautiful scrapbook. It was from a student from 1937, and we went through it page by page. And I'm looking forward to digitizing this because, I mean, there were so many little letters and notes from boyfriends and her sorority sisters, and all the records of all the dances and programs they attended. And this young lady, she really got to look at comparing herself as a Wilson student today and looking at the past and thinking about different things that could happen in her school life, different opportunities she would have as an adult. And it was so fascinating, and it was great watching her get so excited. So, you know, Juan, I look forward to your project because to be able to incorporate the history into the present is just so wonderful for students.
And I'm going to bring up somewhat of a doggy downer. Only because I would love to do some digital project with what I have. What I'm going to bring up is that sometimes when schools have been renovated, like Eastern was renovated, result might be a loss of materials, and which I'm sure other people can address, the whole idea of dumpster diving.
Yes.
And it's so at Eastern, it's a little disheartening where I might be missing like a decade, 60s to 70s of yearbooks. And I'm pretty confident that those materials might have been tossed while Eastern was being renovated. And I wasn't there at the time. There wasn't anybody to be managing that. So that's my doggy downer. However, in terms of the material that is there, and once I got there and I went into the Hall of Fame, which is where everything was stored, I noticed that there was a temperature control issue. So I immediately called Kimberly, and you know, she came over and she agreed with me, and we got those materials moved out of the side room in that Hall of Fame area, and then moved into the library where it's now organized and available for people to view. But I would really like to do a digitizing project, and I haven't come to grips yet with what that will be or how it will be done. But I think it will be important in order to get the information, you know, more out there as opposed to people having to come in to see it.
Yeah, and it's a difficult process because, you know, digitizing requires a lot of grant support because we don't get that support from our schools or from the school system. You know, many of our books that were digitized were done because an alumnus worked at the Library of Congress, and he would drop by and pick up a couple of books and take them with him to work. And a couple of weeks later, he'd come back. You know, different teachers and students would do different pieces of it. We did write 2 grants, one to start the process. And then that's where I met Kimberly. And then we found a gap in our history around 1968 because we were looking at the riots in Washington, D.C. That was also the time I remember desegregation at Wilson and Deal and Wilson. You know, the what was it, Hanson versus Hobson case that required them to bring Blacks over to the Tinley area and change the boundaries of schools. And there was nothing there about 1968. So we wrote another grant, and we had the Alumni Association, and I put together an archive committee of parents and alumni, and we had to do a panel discussion. We found students, alumnus who attended during those years and brought them in, and we videotaped that so we could add that to the record. So our archive, our digital archive is actually a library guide because we use LibGuides at Wilson, and we have recorded videos as well as oral histories, other things that we're putting in addition to the beacons and the yearbooks and other resources. But it's going to cost money. It is really going to cost money to bring this all together. So, and a lot of dumpster diving. Yes, Ellen, a lot of dumpster diving.
I just wanted to jump in there in regards to talking about digitizing and pulling. I think digitizing is like the end result where everything is neatly packaged and accessible. But what you all are doing now to first put your hands on it, list and find out what you have is step one. And again, I'm so grateful for all of you on this panel that have taken an interest in the responsibility and seeing how valuable these materials are and preserving them in your spaces.
And we are so grateful.
You're gonna get there.
Yeah.
Because Kimberly, you and the Sumner Museum, you are really setting the standard for us. I know you and I have been talking recently about how to do the inventory on the physical items that are still at Wilson. And, there are no guidelines. So we have to turn to you for that. That's important.
So Rachel has a question in the chat for me. She says she didn't hear what school I was talking about, and she wanted to know why they didn't have a librarian. So Rachel, the school I'm talking about is Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School. However, they are not the only one. DCPS is, and I'm not sure, since I'm not a teacher or in the school system, I'm not really sure what the term is, but I think they call it accessing or whatever, but they have removed money from the budget for librarians. And so we're not the only school that doesn't have.
Not the only school. I'm looking at the possibility of being accessed myself this year. We're hoping that there'll come more money to the budget so that we can keep the library open at Wilson with a librarian. But I don't know. I don't know what the future holds.
We definitely are hearing now just how valued you all are. So, I think it's just important to have these platforms and share this information too, as well. I'm going to jump into the chat because there's a lot of questions here. We have one from John Libby, who is from Wilson.
Yes.
He wants to know, what kinds of items from the school's archival collection have you found most useful in teaching local history to modern students? So is there, and I know you talked about that a little bit, Pam, but can you all think of other things you may have discovered in the collection that really is helpful in illuminating something related to local history, DC history?
I think I'm just going to jump in on this one, but I think the most useful things that I have found out are the alumni. The alumni that want to go back to school and tell the stories. John Rosenthal, the one who took the famous picture of Iwo Jima, he graduated from McKinley. And we didn't have a photo club in our high school, and a couple of students, I shared that information with them. They started learning about the photo, and now they want to develop a club for photography club, which I think that's kind of like the point, you know, just kind of like bring the students to like, well, we can do these things. And there's another Polish author who wrote a famous biography of Ulysses Grant as well, that graduated from McKinley. And that, I think the alumni is being the ones when you connected with alumni and they be able to tell you stories and you can bring them into your schools. I think those are the really important. They're not actually items, but like treasures for us, I think. My personal opinion. You muted, Pam.
The ability to easily interview people and create video clips is just a wonderful thing for students to be able to use, because now they can ask the questions that they need for their research, for their studying, and to learn about the district. But you know, one of the things we found yesterday in that scrapbook, and I wish we could get more of those kind of items from the alumni. We found this girl was named Miss Freshman when she graduated from Wilson and went to college her freshman year. And her crown was so simple, but when we saw the photograph of her with the crown, but then we saw the crown, and we realized 1937 was the end of the Depression era. And here in Washington, D.C., her old poster, because the poster was on the backside, and it was just the plain cardboard to the front that she wore, you know, and they wore and made the crown. So that was just really fascinating to pull DC history, you know, and then to see the tea parties and the flowers, the boyfriend, there were still the preserved flowers in this that the boyfriends were bringing to her. It was fascinating, and the kids love it. They absolutely love it.
So I have a funny story just to share, and then I'm going to respond to a question that Jared Sawyer had about any artifacts in the schools relevant to the churches in DC. My funny story is this. When we started trying to gather the things that were just thrown in different places or whatever, the one thing we found was the pen, the scroll pen that was used to authorize students to get bus school tickets. And I was working with a group of students because I was showing them, based on, again, the guidance that Kimberly had shared with me about how to catalog stuff. And I'm going, oh, don't, you know, it was in a glass frame. And I'm going, oh, be very, very careful. Don't. And they're looking at me like, well, why is this pen so interesting? And I'm like, well, the first Black secretary signed this bill that allowed you to get school tickets. And they looked at me, and it dawned on me that Muriel Bowser had come along and signed a bill for them to ride the subway and the buses for free. So they didn't need school tickets. So that wasn't exciting to them. So when you're talking about bringing things forward to the kids, you know, and I think about it, and when we do the tours, I had one student say to me, "Why is everybody in this museum dead?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So what we did was purchase a couple of cases, and then we would have a contest during certain times to allow them to actually put somebody in the museum that was not dead, that they knew that they could kind of rally around. And to Jared's question about anything in the schools relevant to the churches, yes. So the fourth pastor of Vermont Avenue Baptist Church, was one of the ministers that did most of the convocations for the DC public schools. So we found a lot of documents on Reverend C.T. Murray. And then we also found, because our fifth pastor, Reverend John R. Wheeler, was also a Dunbar alumni, we found things that we didn't know about him. So we knew he was a history teacher. We knew he loved history. We knew he was our pastor, but nobody knew he was a thespian. And so we found documents of his where, you know, playbills and that kind of thing that he was in. So yes, I mean, it's all, that's why I say it's all of our history.
And there have been, of course, a lot of important people from all the different schools that have graduated. And so, like, for instance, from Eastern, Franklin McCain was one of the Greensboro Four who did the sit-in. That is exciting as all get out. So it's really, if you go back and look at some, you know, lists of people, it's unbelievable how many famous people or important activists have come from the DC public school system.
Yes, that truly reiterates why the history is so important. I think I stated in my opening remarks that yes, it's related to the school. Yes, it's related to local history, but many, many people came out of the schools and went on to do wonderful things and walk the halls. So that indeed is just one major connection as an example to show kids today, like what you can aspire to be, people that came right out of your school space. There are lots of questions. I'm going to bounce around a little bit between questions in the chat and also a couple more that I have. When we were preparing for this meeting, and just what I know from my personal relationship with each of you all is I call you all superheroes. I know you have gone above and beyond and through some leaps and bounds to save school history and or further fortify your collection. So if anybody wants to share just something that's, you know, that's notable or interesting in regards to some of the things that you've done to make the library an awesome space for students, or to save a piece of history connected to the school.
All right, I'm going to jump in on this. And I just recently, before we got on here, I looked at a short clip of the basketball team at Spin Garden Senior High School. So it was the last graduating class. So it was a 3-minute clip, and Keith Jackson is the coach, and the kids were talking about, you know, how sad it was that the history of Spin Garden in terms of being a basketball powerhouse was done. But the first thing when I was working at Spin Garden and I found out February 2013 that they were closing our school, I immediately packed up, immediately called Kimberly and immediately packed up all the yearbooks, packed up any photographs that I had in the library. I had an oil painting of Joel Elias Spingarn. What else do I have? Oh, yes, the complete bound collection of the Journal of Negro History. So all of that got packed up, and Kimberly came and we were shoving boxes off the back loading dock into her car. And I think you had to make more than one run. And you know, we spoke earlier in our preparatory meeting for this, you know, a regret that I had. I got everything out of the library that was kind of like in my domain. And but I regret not pulling stuff like Elgin Baylor's basketball jersey, or Dave Bing was another great player that came out of Spingarn. And it was wrong of me to assume that that would be taken care of. And I can kick myself for that. And hopefully somebody's got it. And maybe if they hear this, might turn it into the Sumner House, Sumner Museum. But anyway, those are my thoughts on my not dumpster diving, but my experience with helping to try and save material.
Yeah, I think we went through the same thing at Wilson when the school was closing for renovation and running all over the building. I remember we used to have the class pictures of every class from 1935 on in one hallway. And I remember getting the custodians, we pulled them down. I wrapped them up, I packed them in boxes, I sent them to the warehouse. And when we got back, we didn't have most of them. It was not until a few weeks ago that I was talking with Kimberly, and she told me about her adventure going to the warehouse because someone called you, right? Yeah.
That's right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And I just found out that she has many of those pictures. That we have a special archival album with preservation materials inside, waiting for those pictures to come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and lots of yearbooks too. You'll be getting some things coming back.
Yes.
Way. Yeah.
Yeah, Kimberly and I had a dumpster dive event as well when they got ready to, oh my goodness, it was amazing. But somebody asked in the chat if there are records at Dunbar as part of the museum. We have a copy of every graduation program. So I think Renee Marcel was asking about her grandmother that graduated from Dunbar in 1920. So yes, if you contact me or the DAF, we can help you with that. But my most precious artifact that we saved, and I'm telling you, Kimberly helped me save a lot of them. We made those trips and those runs. They tried to put us out to school, but we were getting stuff out of there left and right before they tore down that building. But under the stage in the 1977 building, before they tore it down to build the 2013 building, was an old piano. And I started doing research on that piano. And what I found out is that Duke Ellington, who actually attended Armstrong, but would come over to Dunbar because that's where the ladies were, and he would play that piano. The piano was in terrible shape. We were able to get the builders of the new building to actually have that piano refurbished, and it is only one of two of its kind in that edition left. So we have that in the school, and I absolutely am so grateful that they were able to do that.
And I didn't even know that, Blanche. That is news to me. And Susan in the chat has noted today is Duke Ellington's birthday as well. So.
And this jazz program in his honor, and that's what made me think
right.
about it.
But no, that's
granddaughter's doing a jazz program. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. But that's wonderful. That shows how taking the extra step to research something, you figure out what the significance is. It looked like an old broken down piano, but that piano has a story, just like many of the objects within the school. Let's see, any other questions in the chat? Y'all, please add. I do want to add, Renee Marcel asked about records. If you joined a little late, the Charles Sumner School Museum and Archives, we also contain records for many of the schools, including Dunbar. So if you need anything from us, you can always email us or reach out to us at info.sumnerschool@dc.gov as well. Yes, awesome. So you all have answered a lot of questions about making the materials relevant for students. Those are questions that I had. I think, for Ellen, I had a question as it pertained to Spingarn. We didn't really get into Spingarn, and right now we are actually we're spearheading a Spingarn legacy project to gather oral histories over the year, 6 decades of history there, and speak with individuals who attended school over the years there. And so the question I had for you in particular is, what do you believe is the value in preserving school history from a school that is no longer open and active? Because again, if it weren't for you, I know you're lamenting about the gym, and we all are, but if it were not for you, we would not have the opening documents and programs of when Spingarn opened, the first class pictures, the earliest yearbooks. There's a wonderful image with Dr. John Hope Franklin and W.E.B. Du Bois and others who were there when the school opened, that if it weren't for you, we would not have those. So, I know you're talking about the gym, but we're very grateful that you were able to remove those items, and now we can interpret and share them with the alumni and the community at large.
I guess in the future for me, I just need to go and take everything out. But yeah, I mean, when you think about that community, and really, how important that school was for the Black community. It was created specifically for Black students. And every time I walked the halls or went up the stairs, it was at one time so incredibly beautiful with the black marble stairs. I just, I can't imagine losing it. And why I'm thinking about this is that there was a video done, like a 26-minute video of somebody who just like walked into the school and was filming it like present day. And it just made me really sad seeing like all the crushed material, going into the science lab and everything's destroyed and water dripping in. And I'm like, this was a very important school in the history of the school, and it was important to maintain. And I'm hoping at some point that something occurs to get it back in shape. I know it's on the historical register, but Kimberly, was it you that brought up the fact that if a building that is in historical register falls in disrepair, can they take it out of historical registry?
I think I have heard some discussion about it. I don't know. I don't have a true confirmation of that.
Okay.
But I think it's a historic school. We know that. So it's important to take care of that building and others in the city as well.
Yeah. It would just make me sad if it was intentionally, and I know this might be a political hot spot here, but if it's intentionally let go so that the property could be sold, because it's probably going to end up being a very valuable property for development, and that would make me very sad.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm sorry. I was looking at the chat to see if there were others. I guess at this point, we're getting near the end of the program. So those who are watching, please, if you have any other questions or comments, please drop them in the chat. But for us with the Sumner Museum, and we've talked about this a little bit, but really want to talk about it, bring it up now, post our discussion. But in what ways do you see the Sumner Museum as a collaborator and support and some of your own site initiatives? Right away, for me, I see the opportunity to connect around digitizing. Each one of us, we could come together. I think I mentioned to all of you all, there's a grant called the CLEAR grant. It's the Library and Information Resources, I think Council of Library Information Resources, and they have a grant called Digitizing Hidden Collections, and if you can collaborate, as a matter of fact, they encourage you to collaborate with other organizations, and that's a very, as I see it, easy way to join forces and digitize materials between our collection and yours that you have in the school. Because at the end of the day, we talked about a lot of dumpster diving. That is not the intent. That is not the intent. It's also not the intent of Sumner Museum to house every single piece of cultural history related to schools. Schools are open and active. The students should have access to some material on site. And then, of course, things that are older or may require special care should be at Sumner, at the Museum for DC Public Schools. And of course, digitizing all of this makes it accessible to people at a wider platform, because obviously if it's not digitized, you have to come in and see it physically, and that only shrinks it down to the local population. So beyond that, what are your thoughts around ways that we as the Sumner Museum can help support some initiatives that you have going or planning to initiate?
What about, I know at one point, Kimberly, you had some workshops to teach the students about archivism and library science. Are you going to do that again?
Yes, we continue. That's something that we do, and we offer a particular group that we have worked with on a consistent basis is Story of Our Schools Project. I don't know if you all are aware of them. If Crystal can drop that link in the chat for others as well. But this organization was started by Jen Harris, and she has coordinated with maybe 4 or 5 schools now, has completed exhibitions inside of school spaces. And they're elementary schools, except for this year, I think she's working with Eastern, Ellen, or COVID may have thrown things off, but I think Hine and Eastern was next. But what they do is work with students to learn about various components, curatorial things, to dig into the history of their school, which includes a trip to Sumner. And I facilitate workshops with those students on a regular basis. But any student population group, we had a whole crew of students doing community service projects right before COVID hit in February 2020. We had about 25 kids, a large majority from McKinley Tech, actually, because we had a very successful career volunteer fair that we participated in. And so within that space, we had to train the students how to handle the material they were going to help process. So always, always those opportunities are available. Just arrange them with us, and we're happy to assist because it's a win-win for everybody.
I think the Sumner and you, Kimberly, are wonderful in helping us, supporting us in developing our collections, setting up new standards, because we know, we've discussed, we do need the standards for our collections. And especially, I'm excited about this idea of a collaborative grant to facilitate everything. And we would definitely need something standardized in order to pull that off. So
Correct.
You're the leader.
I'm ready.
All right.
Well, I know that
there was a question from Alice Griffin on the digitization and how are the rec files stored. And I can tell you at Wilson, we received a grant from the humanities, the Commission for Humanities, and we purchased Past Perfect. And most of our digitized items are stored up in a cloud, so that, you know, that makes us available through the internet. And yes, grant monies can provide some support, but most grants are so small and they're single project based. So it's hard to get a lot of money for digitizing. But I'll tell you, at Wilson, we have a great parent-teacher student organization, and we have a great alumni association who have worked very, very closely with us to help make a lot of this possible.
Pam, what kind of cost is like Past Perfect?
Past Perfect is under $700 a year. I mean, it's not terribly expensive, but and it's just essential. You know, you have to. I really would like to see a different program, because I think Past Perfect is really for museums and for
Objects,
university art, you know,
yeah.
Librarians to use. So I would like to see something that was more student friendly, user friendly to build out these projects. And maybe that's something we can all look into and come up with a better platform.
But does a platform like that have the built-in for indexing?
Well, you have to do all of that yourself. So
I know, but
each item you put in, you have to do the indexing. You have to put the keywords in. You have to put the description in. So it's a whole process for each item. So
there are others too. Past Perfect, I've seen more geared towards like objects more so. It's not, you know, it's good to have. It's definitely better than not having any platform. There's another one called Archive Space that's more relevant to archives, which you have mostly archival materials is what you all have in your spaces. You have some objects too, but for the baseline, mostly archival archive space, which we don't have that, we don't use that, but it sounds like it's something that could be useful, and it's kind of a community governed subscription, so it's pretty economical as well. There are lots of things out there. There are all sorts of things that are cloud based now too, which I'm still kind of nervous about.
We also kept every record on external drives.
Yes.
So we would make sure if the crowd closes down, if the cloud clears up,
right,
we still have our records to be able to launch again.
Jared Sawyer's
fear the turtle, don't fear the cloud.
Right. What did you say about the cloud, Blanche?
I said, fear the turtle, don't fear the cloud.
I hear that. Someone asked about explaining what Past Perfect is, and we got into a tangent about collections database. It's a collections management system is what it is, a means to organize and list and in a sense inventory what you have housed in your collections.
Right.
So yes, so we are nearing the end here. Is there anything else that you all would like to add before we close out?
I would like to really, to begin with, say thank you for this opportunity. Also to bear it out, the opportunity to bring in McKinley alumni to send, lend, or borrow, or just bring some other memorabilia they might have. Since I'm in the baby steps of this project, this is just the beginning of the project. I can assure you that I will work really hard to preserve it and meet the purpose. So any McKinley alumni that is willing to provide any items that you may have, I'm happy to welcome it. And I can share with you some photographs as well of the many items that we have. And I've been collecting a lot of really random stuff that unfortunately we didn't have the time to share, because I'm sure all of us have that. But yes, please contact me if you have anything.
Excellent. That reminds me too, I saw someone else in the chat ask Ellen if there was an Eastern Alumni Association. So again, as Ellen has mentioned, that some things may have been lost. And I know for a fact with Eastern's collection, a lot of our collection at Sumner, we don't have very many yearbooks in particular from the 60s. Like we have 1959 and then we have 1969. So I don't know what happened to 60 through 68. So if anyone is in earshot of this live stream and you would like to donate a yearbook for Eastern High School within those years, please reach out to us.
It would be greatly appreciated. Because not that, we field the calls from people all over the country or the world if they're Eastern alum, and they call to say that they want to get their senior picture. So a lot of times I take a picture of the picture and text it to them or whatever. But unfortunately, several of them that call and it's like in the 60s, and I have to say, I'm so sorry. And it's so disheartening. But since I've been there, I was thinking what Blanche was saying earlier. Since I've been there, at graduation, I make sure I get the program. I run after the person who gave the speech to get the actual copy of their speech that they gave. It's so funny to be running after them. Can I have that, please? Prom tickets, prom programs, trying to gather all those kind of things. But it's interesting how school dynamics have changed, where we used to have a school newspaper, and there used to be, a huge thespian club, and there would be programs all for that. So we have that kind of stuff historically, but unfortunately, it's not what we have more contemporary. We don't have those sorts of things. So it's interesting how things have changed, but we do everything we can to gather for the contemporary years, anything that gets produced, any kind of program. Another one is National Honor Society, the program for that, all kinds of stuff. So
yeah, it's interesting to mention the National Honor Society, because we found documentation when Dunbar got the national award And some of us remembered that there was a banner hanging in the old building and we couldn't find it. So we contacted the education department and they sent us the seal, but they could not send us the seal from that particular year because it no longer existed. So yeah, so it was kind of a semi-win, but not really. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for this wonderful panel. I'm so, again, honored and pleased that you all spent time to share with us about your roles as librarians and your role, Blanche, in preserving history related to Dunbar and also your librarian's impact on you. And to those who are joining us, please stay connected with us. Please stay connected with these wonderful people here who are working diligently to preserve the history of their schools they're associated with. You will see information streaming on the bottom of the screen, I believe, on how to stay in touch with us at Sumner Museum. Again, we have a research library and various exhibits. We are currently closed to the public, but hope to be open in the near future. And ways that you can learn about that as well is by joining our mailing list, which you can do so, make that request by emailing us. So again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you to my wonderful panelists and have a fantastic evening.